School board workshop, strategic plan goals for Tuesday, September 7th to order. First item on the agenda is a strategic plan update. Dr. Pace, turn it over to you.
I'm going to ask Scott to run back and talk to Dana. Strategic plan for the coming school year. As you know, we first did our all goals stock take at the mid-year point in January so that we could go over the goals, go over where we thought we were and where we would go from here. We've talked again about the strategic plan in June and also in July and August. And the idea is that we want to make sure that we are aligning a working, living, breathing document that we would adapt as conditions warranted and as the board priorities warranted, but that it truly would be used to guide the work of not just our leadership team here at the district office, but also the work in our schools, so that we have ongoing monthly check-ins, we call them our stock take process, to look at where we are with our goals, what is the data telling us in terms of how close we are to making progress towards meeting our metrics, make any adjustments in terms of allocation of resources, changes to strategies, so that again, we can always come back to you at the end of the year to say, this really has guided our work. I also want to remind the board that just because something is not in our strategic plan, it doesn't mean that it's not something that we're doing. It's kind of like you don't need to write a note to remind yourself to brush your teeth in the morning. It's a part of your daily habit. That's what we do. And as we have made commitments to the board earlier on, once those are accomplished and they become the way of work, then we take them out of the strategic plan, but that doesn't mean that we stop doing them. For example, a big priority of the first strategic plan was not just community engagement, but increasing communication and customer service. So we ramped up our social media presence significantly. That continues to be an area of focus. We also had a strong rollout of a customer service plan. Just because you don't see that in this document doesn't mean that it's no longer important. It just means that it's become the way the district kind of operates. So that's kind of where we are with our strategic plan process. Goal 1, academic success, is really again about what are the board's priorities and then strategies that the team has developed to help ensure that we achieve those outcomes at the end of the year. 1A is about the high quality standards-based curriculum. 1B is about what are effective strategies for learning. 1C is about closing achievement gaps and equitable practices to support our subgroups. Goal D is, or strategy D, is about acceleration opportunities for all students, starting as early as second grade when we do gifted screening. And then also in E, which is one that we've added this year, a really clear and specific focus on math, because we know that is an area that we've struggled. So the two big changes that we're recommending as strategies for this particular goal is 1A, we've developed a new observation tool. We've kind of tried to streamline that and focus on making sure that it is about that implementation of the guaranteed and viable curriculum in our curriculum unit plans with the district adopted resources that we know align with the state standards, and emphasis on making sure that teachers and principals know that this is not about an evaluative process. It's not a gotcha game. It's about collecting data so that we can inform the work of our resource teachers and coaches who are supporting the work of our teachers doing what's really important with our students. Strategy 1B, for the last 3 years, we've talked about read, write, talk, and solve being the major things that we wanted to see in all classrooms, trying to make it as simple as we possibly can. But with the adoption of AVID as a high-yield strategy that also has research to show that it helps to close achievement gaps and supports our sometimes underserved students, we wanted to be consistent in our messaging So instead, we've gone to what are the Wicker strategies, and those are the ones that are in the Avid program. It's a part of our training, and you can see that it still is reading, writing, talking, and solving. It's just using a different vocabulary. So write, inquiry, or solve, collaborate, which is also a part of solving, organizing, because that's one of the real strengths of Avid, is that it helps our students to learn how to organize their thinking, organize their notes, to help prepare them for later academic success, and then read, continuing to be important. And then in 1E, there's a newfound focus on math led by our coordinator, Andrea Juergens, our district ed specialist, as well as resource teachers working with math coaches in every school to try to support rollout of the curriculum, rollout of the high priority strategies that really are essential for kids to catch up and fill in those gaps from math as we move forward for the year. So I'll take any questions or recommendations, concerns, suggestions that you guys have for academic success.
I do have a question, Dr. Pace. How do we determine the next magnet programs that we're going to explore? And do we have any of those in the works right now?
Yes, that is actually a part of the work in Goal 4.
Okay.
With goal community engagement and choice programs. Dr. Rafalski has been working with the assistant superintendent as well as principals and staff at the school's leadership teams. And the goal is to try to make sure that we have academic programs, magnet programs, curriculum programs at every school, whether they have magnet transportation or not, that are high attractive to their community and that feed into those high wage, high demand jobs that our local economy is striving to recruit here in our county.
Okay, okay, thank you.
I got something, where's the, and I know you said earlier that not everything can be in the strategic plan, some things are just normal. What about the digital one-to-one? As far as everyone getting a device and how that rollout is going and who's the lead on that? To me, that's kind of part of academic success. I was looking at all the goals again to figure out where would that fit, where would one-to-one rollout fit? You know, I mean, since that is a big thing, where exactly is that and how are we holding that to accountability?
We've embedded that in Goal 3 as a part of fiscal responsibility. One of the things that you'll see throughout this plan is that all of the goals really work together. They aren't in silos and the teams aren't working in silos to support it. For example, we always talk about talent management being absolutely essential for academic success. We know that we can't do the best work for our students if we don't have high-quality teachers in all of our classrooms. We also know that if we aren't equitably distributing our resources and making the best use of our fiscal dollars, we can't achieve academic success. So we try to make sure that all of those things kind of tie together and the team is working together as opposed to in silos to make sure those things are happening.
Because remember how we switched the healthcare evaluation from one strategy to another? Maybe we may consider moving the digital programs into row 1, because I believe that if used properly, you know, getting students familiar with technology and the curriculum that's available, there's different learning apps and things like that, so we can use that device to help them as a learning tool. I see it more as a learning tool than as a fiscal tool. Fiscal was when you use Dell as a sole supplier and you try to save money by being able to pull out a hard drive from one computer to another, that has more of a fiscal impact. But when we go one-to-one device learning, I don't think of that as saving the district money. I mean, we spent money to get it. And that's money that I don't mind spending because I believe that one-to-one supports the academic growth of a student, because in reality, technology's coming. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, no matter what field you work in now, I can't imagine a field without a computer. So getting kids familiar with software and programs and learning how to properly use a computer without abusing it. And that's just my opinion, I'm just one board member, you know what I mean? But I just think that maybe that one-to-one development and making sure that students are getting enhanced curriculum kind of deserves to be in its own kind of element in Goal 1. Maybe Goal 1F. I mean, I hate to create another goal, I mean, but
I see
That-
what
this is
you're
a
saying.
workshop.
Things right, and that's what this discussion is about, because this is the board's plan, this is what we do as a result of what you guys prioritize. One of the things that caused us to keep it in Goal 3 was because of the fact that we need to make sure that this is a sustainable implementation of a one-to-one plan. Some of it could go in Goal 2, because if you don't provide the quality professional development to help teachers use the tools with students effectively, then it really doesn't contribute to academic success. But I'm here to hear the feedback of the board.
I understand what you're saying, Board Member Melendez. I see your point. However, I think that what you're describing is more of an activity than a separate goal. And I can also understand why it's under fiscal responsibility because we are using grant money for this, right? In the beginning to
It is a
kind
part
fund
of
it.
our ESSER two and ARP
then-
plan.
Right, and then after that, the goal is to make it sustainable. Maybe it can be represented under academic success, perhaps under an activity, because the activity, if I'm not mistaken, is to provide the one-to-one technology for students. So I think that it might fit under an activity or having the one-to-one can fit under an activity, but I do think that the way that it's currently listed is the right place to do it, only because it is addressing the fact that we're using grant money, and then we have to make sure that it is sustainable for the duration, I guess, of us having this. Does that make sense? That's the way I see
Or
it.
even it could be both, and I mean, like,
Sure,
the
we can move.
sustainment of the one-to-one devices could be in fiscal responsibility, the academic growth, because, yeah, we can keep it, but what's the purpose of keeping it? And I mean, at least in my mind,
Right.
we have them to use as a tool. The goal isn't just to have a laptop, just to have a laptop and say, hey, we have a laptop in every kid's hands. There should be some reason why they have a laptop or a device. And
Does
I'm
that
not
fit
just like,
under any of the other academic success strategy statements, you think?
Yeah, and I'm not married to each one. The point is, I just think that, like, I don't have to like change it right now. You know what I mean? If we can sit back and maybe come back and say, hey, at the next meeting, let's think about moving it over. I just wanted to have that discussion, and then maybe staff can make a recommendation on where it belongs. If there needs to be another goal, if there needs to be an activity. I just think that for some reason, these
1D.
devices help enrich the curriculum, and I want to know how much of it that curriculum is doing and holding that to account from an education standpoint or from an academic standpoint.
I wonder
if
if
it could fit in 1D.
Yeah,
Because we
that's
talk
what I was
about
looking
using the Zello platform, we talk about STEM and career and technical education programs and making sure that students are college, career, and life readiness. And certainly the use of technology goes there. Does that make sense?
And we can still keep the fiscal accountability of it
Yeah, I
in
think
fiscal.
there's a use and a practical pay for it. They're two different.
So we'll add it as an activity under 1D if that pleases the board.
You okay with that? I think it's a good point.
Okay.
And then the other one was the virtual school itself, like Osceola Virtual School. Do we want to have a strategy for Osceola Virtual School? Like, what's kind of the intent by that? I mean, I know right now we're using Osceola Virtual School a lot because of the COVID, but is that part of our long-term strategy? Do we want to have Osceola Virtual School forever? Like, what's the purpose of it? And to me, when I think of strategic plan, I kind of want to like announce like what's its purpose, you know what I mean? There's a purpose there just to capture FTE, and if that's the goal, that's okay, we don't want to lose money, and that's a legit goal, but is it, you know, what is the purpose of Osceola Virtual School? And, you know, because it's not free, it is costing us resources, teachers, time, you know, we just renovated a building in St. Cloud Middle School, so I would like to see Osceola Virtual School. Again, I don't know where, I'm not married to that. I'm just saying, I would like to have some kind of strategic vision for how to use, you know, Osceola Virtual School, and how is it complementing the overall services that we render to our students.
Currently, it fulfills two primary purposes. Number one is statutory compliance. Every district is required to offer a virtual school program. And number two, we also want to capture our students who are earning that required half credit of a virtual class during their high school years for graduation requirements, instead of it going to Florida Virtual School. Because that actually, yes, there's a cost involved in providing it, but it also recoups some of the FTE that otherwise would go to Florida Virtual School for our high school students who must have a virtual school course.
Oh, because statute made it as a requirement to graduate. You can't graduate unless you take one virtual class.
Correct, and we've had a virtual school program for a while because it's been required for a while. It's just gotten more attention now because of the pandemic and COVID. But it also has worked effectively for some credit recovery purposes. Yes, we offer credit recovery in our high school programs. If the board is interested in expanding or growing that program over more than we already have as a result of the pandemic, that might be even something that, as we look at next year's strategic plan, which we'll have to start doing in January because this is year 3 of this plan, that should be a priority. That's up to the board.
Right, like, do we want to like Well, you're my superintendent, I like what you say, you know, I lean on you, you know what I mean, because you're the expert. Do you think, because you mentioned that was interesting, I didn't think about that. What can overlap for credit recovery and Osceola virtual, because that's kind of interesting. Because we have, I guess, a different curriculum and software for students that need to get credit recovery. Can virtual school, I'm also thinking too, somebody has a surgery, I hate to say that, you know, they're out for a month, you know what I mean? And so, you know, again, COVID aside, you know, sometimes students have to miss a prolonged period of time. And can they go to that virtual school, or do they have to do credit recovery? What's the purpose of that now? Like if somebody, no COVID, you know, I'm playing on the football team, Harmony. Oh, I got my leg knocked out and I can't even go to school, or I'm on drugs or whatever. I can't even think about a car accident or something. And I have to be out of school for a month. How does that student get their education?
The virtual school program is not something that you can drop in and out of for a month. Those courses require 18 weeks of dedicated time. Some students will progress through the curriculum faster, but it's not something that you can drop in and out of for like a month of time. But if a student, for example, had a long-term illness and was going to be out for a semester or more, they might want to enroll in our Osceola virtual school program where our teachers can support their learning. And then two, for academic recovery, typically we like to offer both programs because of our emphasis on getting kids through with graduation rate on time with their cohort. There are some students who need that supervision of a caring, dedicated teacher. The best academic recovery labs are run by somebody who's like a coach. They're a cheerleader, they're a champion, they're gonna get onto the kid when he's not motivated, and kind of be there to support that learning. For example, that's what you see at Zenith, in a lot of those programs, but we also have academic recovery labs at each one of our high schools. And we have for a long time to help monitor kids through the rapid curriculum because they failed a class somewhere along the line, or maybe several, and that allows them to do it. Other kids who missed that, you know, had a bad quarter or bad semester in algebra, but they kind of got on with the program and they just need to make up that half a credit and they're self-motivated, they can do it at home. That's where the Osceola Virtual School academic recovery comes in.
Because it's more self-paced. So it's not because they're struggling academically, they just, for whatever reason, missed it, and they can catch up quicker. The credit recovery programs that we have currently in place, that's not Osceola Virtual School. Like you said, it's coaches, they're tutors, the remedial learning to get that student caught up because they didn't get it, they didn't understand it the traditional way. Or they
And
failed
we're
for whatever reason.
monitoring credits earned every week, you know, championing them, putting little stickers on the wall, all that kind of stuff.
But I'm fine with that then. So at least I guess the purpose of the workshop to help me clear my mind. So yeah, so virtual school is not really, I mean, it's there for statutory requirements, and that's, I guess, like a brushing your teeth and all. I'm keep using your analogy all the time. So I guess it's something that we don't really aspire to. If it evolves into something different, then I'm good. Thank you.
Anything else for academic success? Great, let's move on then to goal 2. As we said, talent management is a critical part of our work, recruiting, developing, and retaining high-quality employees. These have been our primary strategies, attracting people to the work to decrease vacancies, providing that high-quality professional learning aligned to individual and organizational needs, and improving strategies to increase retention. And we've modified this strategy quite a bit to include compensation, benefits, and culture based on your feedback. So a couple of things that we're looking at in terms of our activities moving forward based on feedback for the board is to establish more consistent interview protocols. We did a little bit of work with this a few years ago with the Urban Schools Human Capital Academy, USHCA, which we had a grant to participate in from DOE with some of the other districts here in Central Florida. They helped us a lot with streamlining our application process, streamlining our onboarding process, and also looking at how we identify and select and develop people, but also looking at what we can do to diversify our hiring best practices. And obviously we have the HR audit coming up. We want to make sure that we build into our strategic plan an important part of our work over the course of this year. We'll be looking at the opportunities for growth and improvement that audit reveals and working with the board to develop a consistent and strong plan to address them. And then in terms of retention, we're looking at making sure that we get exit interviews stood up. and also do stay interviews, and then that competitive salary and benefits, which is in looking at our healthcare plan and making sure that it is also meeting the needs of our employees through surveys and other types of things to kind of strengthen that engagement of what's offered, why it's offered, and how to make best use of that in terms of education campaigns and other things. Just to give the board an idea of what stay interviews are, prior to COVID, we worked with Dick Finnegan, who was a human resources consultant specifically concentrating in the work of retention of high-quality employees. In terms of what you can do to keep those good employees motivated and on board and how you monitor that process. So we implemented prior to COVID what we call a stay interview process. And all the leaders of the team, district leaders and school leaders, meet with each employee at least twice during the course of the year, just simply to assess where they are in terms of their satisfaction with the work, what are they struggling with, what additional supports they need. And then we develop a system of red, yellow, green. You know, there are some people who are happy, satisfied, motivated, and gonna stay. Those are the green folks. Then there are those yellow folks who are struggling, they're stressed, they're frustrated by certain elements of the work or interactions with others. What can we do to help make the workplace a better place, a more effective place, a place where they feel valued and respected? And then there are the reds. And the reds we've got to really target for these people are walking out the door if we don't get some things fixed now. Now, sometimes there's a red that is intentionally red because we're working hard to address some deficiencies, some performance issues, you know, whatever that particular case is. But we always want to have a mind of where we are with that. And it's something that, you know, we heard from folks that said, that was really meaningful, made me feel valued, and that's an area of focus that we need to concentrate on again this year during COVID. You know, it's not something you can do over a WebEx or over a Zoom meeting, but we're at a place now where we're all back in the buildings, we're all working with kids. We need to start having those individual face-to-face meetings, just doing it safely.
So thank you for including metrics, by the way, for the conversion as well as a reduction of, the retention. So I appreciate that.
And certainly we would love for those all to be 100, but in looking at
They're not
industry
gonna be,
standards,
yeah.
we felt like this was a stretch goal.
Yeah.
But one that would improve our work, and we'll continue to move that up as we go.
Do you guys have any updates on, are we gonna hire someone, a vendor for the exit interviews, or are we doing those internally?
We are still exploring that process. I believe we've developed some online kinds of things that we're working on, and then we need to provide some training on our principals and
Yeah.
for staff about how we do those.
Perfect.
But certainly we'll engage the board if you have additional feedback or suggestions about how to do that well, let us know.
Trust you.
Just out of curiosity, on an exit interview, is it better, I know some people, they want to dart and run. I mean, I know there's like a function of time. The longer you wait, then it's gonna go out there. Do you know, how often do we know that somebody's gonna leave? Do they usually give us like, I mean, they're supposed to give us like 2 weeks' notice. That's like a professional courtesy thing. But how many people have given us 2 weeks' notice in advance? I'm not expecting an answer right now.
It varies.
Because I was thinking if they are giving us 2 weeks' notice, I'm thinking you want to do that, that's the when to trigger the exit interview before they walk out the door, and it's hard to get them.
You know, unfortunately, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen that somebody just gets so overwhelmed and frustrated that they literally bring their keys and put it on the desk and they're out the door. How much useful feedback we would get from that person, it's important for us to know why the root causes of that and what we could have done differently. We encourage our principals to stop, drop, and roll. Sit down with that person, see if there's anything else that you can do at that moment that would have helped, that would still potentially help to relieve their stress. Because the two biggest challenges that we're all facing right now, I really believe are number one, obviously, the effects of the pandemic and COVID and contact tracing, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and how consuming that becomes in terms of taking people off mission. But then it's also the vacancies and just the shortage of labor in the workforce, particularly talented, educated labor to teach our schools, drive our buses, serve our cafeteria meals, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I guess if we can make that like a, not like a policy, like a fancy policy, but like, I don't know, like a procedure or whatever.
Yeah, a procedure.
That whenever there is a 2 weeks notice, that we start thinking about, hey, approaching that person with the exit interview. And then, like I said, we don't know what the numbers are, maybe at the next board meeting as an informational item, just out of curiosity, how many people that left us the district last year, how many gave us a 2 weeks notice versus not? And that way we can kind of gauge it. So I think that's a good strategic way to kind of start counting it and then saying, hey, 2 weeks notice, we automatically need to give them an exit interview. So
I don't know that
try
we
to
currently
increase
have a
numbers.
system for tracking that. That's one of the things that Mr. Arguello has identified as a real challenge for us is our tracking systems in HR. We're still, not to make excuses, but we are still using the green screen technology terms, which is difficult to pull reports from. But we're continuing to work at that, and part of goal 3 is looking at that long-term plan for an ERP conversion, which would include an up-to-date human resources system. But one of the things that we are excited about with RSM is that when you work with them on an audit, they identify the areas for opportunity, but then they also have experts within their company, people who we don't even know yet, who help to provide guidance and strategies for moving forward. We've done that now with cybersecurity. We're doing that now with the Health Trust Fund and the Health Services Plan audit, and I fully anticipate that we'll do that also with the human resources piece. Any other questions, comments, input? If not, we'll move on to goal 3. This is an area of obvious focus, and again, they all kind of tie together, of making sure that we are managing our taxpayer dollars responsibly and transparently with people as we move forward. So we're always looking at, in 3A, ways to increase our operational efficiency. I have identified in 3B, the outreach plan for renewal of the quarter penny sales tax. Of course, that would be pending board discussion and board approval, and also consultation and collaboration with our other community governmental agencies. Establishing a local vendor education campaign and reviewing our current protocols to make sure that our procurement practices are fair and equitable. We did our workshop in February on procurement. We updated our selection scoring ranks for our selection, for example, for CMs. We've provided training to the teams, but we know that this is still an area where we have a lot of room to grow, and we're committed to doing that. And then one of the things that we heard, if you remember, from our Alliance for Public Schools process was the importance of making sure that the perception in the community and the reality is that we are equitably distributing resources, including time, money, and personnel. Keeping in mind that equity is not the same as equal. It's making sure that schools have what they need. So for example, as we asked at the last board meeting for approval of the additional hour of PLC, for some of our schools that are high needs right now, that's an additional equitable allocation of resources because they get a little more than others, but that's because we think they need it and we think it will help them move the envelope. So specifically in terms of changes that you would see in the plan, the metrics, the activities, and the statements, as I said, number 3A is where that one-to-one plan comes in. Mr. Melendez, where we talk about making sure that that's stood up, that it has the right level of support, the right level of training, systems readiness. We've talked about reducing negative phishing as a result of the cyber attack issues that we have that were uncovered in our cybersecurity audit, as well as ongoing monitoring. And you can see some of the other things there in terms of making sure that our processes are as efficient as possible. What you don't see here is energy and waste savings, which is something that we have been focusing on for the last 5 years. That doesn't mean that we're going to back off or slow down on our efforts to save money in terms of electricity and waste management and use of water, those types of things, but that has now become a way of work. And then the last activity, Mr. Melendez, as you can see, is to initiate a multi-year strategy for an ERP transition that would include the research, project management strategy, and a financial plan to make sure that that is sustainable. 3B is the outreach plan for renewal of the quarter penny sales tax. The first activity there would be to seek school board approval for a collaborative campaign. We're not right there yet, but I think that's something that we've talked about. And looking for feedback on the board. Is this something that we want to specifically identify as a strategy this year? We're not. Doesn't mean that we would all support it or not support it, but that is a conversation that the board wants us to have. And then goal 3C would be really the strong focus in purchasing on local vendor and equitable procurement practices.
Dr. Bates, Sarah, I don't have my bad package with me, I usually bring it. What's our loss of revenue if that doesn't get passed?
I'm sorry?
What would be our loss of revenue if that quarter penny does not get passed?
We get around $15 million a year now.
15?
Quarter penny.
Quite sizable amount.
Well, and it's interesting because it has recovered from
I know,
the
yeah.
pandemic. We actually met budget goals that we weren't sure back in January, February, March that we were gonna meet.
I know Frank's not here, but I had asked a question before that, the splitting of that, like part of it goes to the city and the county. That I wanted to see what is the maximum contribution we can get, because, the school board always passes these taxes, you know, if the county tries to pass it on their own, they're not gonna pass it. They kinda need us to kinda pass it. And so I was talking about, instead of, you know, I forgot how the fractional share went, if we get a third,
We get a quarter,
Quarter, yeah.
the two cities get half of a quarter, 100%,
Yeah.
the county gets half, I believe.
so I wanna see if maybe we can get the bigger portion, because if a voter's gonna vote for it, they're not gonna vote for it because, oh yeah, the county is doing a great job, they're gonna vote for it because of the school board. So I wanted to see statutorily, and he's not here now, but when he comes back later, if he can come with an answer. I know, but she's
There
not
it is,
gonna
but I'm
have
not
his-
prepared.
his-
I'd be happy to research it or
Yeah.
pass it on to Frank.
I did research that,
Okay.
and statutorily, there's no percentages, so it's all up to negotiation
Yeah,
between
so
the.
I wanna negotiate that we get the higher portion, so instead of half of it go to the county, half of it goes to us, because, and I'm just being honest, I know it may sound like I'm being cute, but realistically, the county just had a sales tax and it failed. Ours passed. If it's gonna pass, it's gonna be because of us, you know, pushing it and saying, hey, we need our schools, and we're gonna be pleading more to the emotion of the voter than the county commissioner or city. So I think it'd be incumbent upon us to at least attempt to negotiate with the counties and the cities for the school district to get the larger share. And we do that all the time. And as an example, the homestead property exemption, the 50,000 applies to the county and cities, it doesn't apply to the school district, only $25,000 homestead applies to us. Why? Because the schools are so important that even the legislature was even willing to give us an extra $25,000 or waive us from $25,000 of homestead exemption, that I think that we shouldn't just give up without a fight at least. I mean, a legit fight. I don't mean that, because these days fight can mean bad things, but I'm talking about advocating because we are gonna be the reason why it passes.
What's our next step with the other municipalities?
It would be scheduling a workshop. They're not quite there yet either, but that would be something that we just need to have a formal board discussion about. Keep in mind too, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, the school board as its own entity cannot go out for another sales tax without a voter referendum, correct? I mean, without, that half penny that we went, it's not like we went out for a half and we
The
could.
most we can do on our own is the half penny that we already have.
So it has to be initiated by the county government, who would then agree to share it with the cities and the school district for this to move forward at all. If our county commission said, we're just gonna let it expire, we can't go out and initiate for this on our own.
No, I understand that, but they're not gonna just let it expire, because they still get money out of it too. That's not a game I think they'll play, because they would want that, because we're not increasing the tax either, we're just talking about the maintenance of the sales tax that exists.
I'll be honest, it would be hard for me to support 3B without corrections or movement or improvement made in 3C.
Absolutely understood, sir. Any other questions or comments? All right, moving on to goal 4. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped 3D, but this is the equity of resources, which we talked about. Which, Mr. Melendez, you asked, or Ms. Castillo, you asked about magnet programs. If you look at the first activity, that says implement a high-quality attractor program at every school. And it can't be a magnet program at every school just because of the cost of transportation and all the things that go into it. But Dr. Rafalski is already prioritizing innovative options to an additional 15 schools for the upcoming school year based on feedback from those school administrations, looking at what are the high-range, high-demand fields in their areas and feeder patterns in our areas.
I don't know if the rest of the board is interested in this as much as I am, but I am interested in having a conversation about how you determine what those programs are and who you're partnering with, just to kind of gauge what the process is. we don't have to do that now, but I wouldn't mind having a separate conversation with you about that. Unless the rest of the board is highly interested in the process for determining magnet innovative programs. No?
That's part of the choice.
Part of those, that's a comprehensive
Part of our
survey
choice and
have
innovation
going
program.
on.
Right, but my question is how do we determine what specific programs we're going to invest in?
And certainly Dr. Rafalski and I can prepare a conversation with you, Ms. Castillo, and then we'll share the information with the rest of the board, either in an information item or a workshop or a board update.
Yeah, because
Perfect.
along those lines though, it does interest me though, because I do like it, period. I can only wrap my head around so many things at once, you know, it's tough.
Yeah,
But I would like every school, and this is just a thought process in the workshop, is every school to at least have one program that they can say that they're proud of. Like Harmony has like the veterinary program, Osceola High School has like an airport, you know what I mean? I'm talking about the high schools specifically. It would be nice that they can have like some kind of niche, you know what I mean? Like there's an IB program or there's something. So then it just enhances like that school pride to say, hey, Gateway is whatever, OXA is a school of the arts, you know what I mean? So it's like, so to that respect, if there's a school lacking a specific identity, then I think that's the perfect time to identify that school. And what it does, I don't know, I don't know. But to Ms. Castillo's point, if they're missing something, let's add something to that school that's missing because everybody else has something unique to their school. And that's the only input that I would really want to.
And that's exactly right, and that's why we want to look at feeder patterns and also what's invested in the community and how we can strengthen that. And that's a conversation with the school-based leadership teams, with Dr. Rafalski from Choice and Innovation. It's a conversation with our CTE folks, Dr. Arnott and Mr. Burdett in terms of where they are and what they see with the high wage, high demand field coming, as well as in with the assistant superintendents, Mr. Flowers, and the rest of the group. And as we're doing these comprehensive renovations, we're very mindful of the fact of what is the programming that we want to be a part of that so that that school can come out of the gate again with that identity that makes them unique and special. And through our choice and innovation kind of marketing, so to speak, we've asked each school, for example, to have a flip grid that talks about what makes their school special and a 5-minute elevator speech so that they can talk about what makes their school special. And we've really ramped up the website on that, but we can certainly share more information with you. Okay? All right, that brings us then to goal 4, community engagement and governance. Here we again have accomplished a lot of our strategies in terms of communication, but based on feedback from the board, the Alliance for Public Schools work, we've identified that we really want to make sure that we're building confidence and trust among our external stakeholders, but also our internal stakeholders, our staff, that we need to make sure believe in the work of the district and understand that it's really about them. So using data and feedback from community conversations to drive offerings and engagement opportunities, capitalizing on the Alliance for Public Schools. So for example, the Kickoff Educate Osceola class is being planned right now. Power Up for Success events for students and families. Aligning that the Student Alliance for Public Schools is doing some good work right now at Liberty High School and at OXA, and just taking that work to the next level. And then 4B is something that we've talked about as being governance and our ability to work together effectively, efficiently, and collectively. It's my understanding that we all are on board with committing again to trimester board training as a way for us to develop a perhaps policy manual for board and superintendent relations, because it is very, very important that how we work together sends a message about culture throughout the whole organization. But certainly welcome the feedback on this as well.
I do think actually that it is really important that we try to do that master board training as soon as possible. And I was one of the ones who was probably not as on board as other people may have been previously. Do we know, have we had a conversation about when, how?
They originally talked about trying to schedule something in September, so I just needed to follow up with them. I wanted to make sure that we had the board's approval or consensus that this is the direction that we want to go, and then I will get us a date.
And if that's not the direction, is there other training possibly that we can discuss that is maybe doesn't require as much participation, or maybe individuals can do? I know that FSBA had a workshop on like conducting meetings effectively in this environment, so I'm thinking something in that sense as well. even
Certainly,
if not
I'll
everyone's on
certainly
board.
follow up with Tina Pinkinson with FSBA and Andrea and see what's available as an option.
I prefer the group.
No, me too, but if it's not available, I think we still need something.
Yeah, I prefer the group as well too. If we wanna, we don't have to schedule it like right now, but, you know, I'm open to like, if you give us a couple dates and then we can just kind of get a consensus on
Okay,
it.
I will follow up. All right, then that brings us to goal 5, which is our school safety and security goal. And again, this is a place where the way of work, something comes off of the strategic plan, but it doesn't mean it's still a priority. So over the course of the last 2 years, after Parkland, and with the increased emphasis of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission and the recommendations that were coming out of that particular group, we felt like it was important to make school safety in terms of physical safety an important strategy in this particular plan. That has now become a way of work. You know, we've made great progress in terms of upgrading security systems in the district, still have a few schools left, but those are on the list and scheduled to be done. We currently have projects that the board has approved and will be approving on an ongoing basis for secure lobbies through our grant. We also have the projects for the DAS radios to make sure that outside external law enforcement communication channels work within our buildings. That's kind of a challenge with the tilt wall construction that we use today. So while you don't see that here, it doesn't mean that that work is stopping. It just means that it's become now a course of business. This is what we do. And so that's moving forward. We felt like instead that it was super, super important to focus on the result of the pandemic last year. And that's why this is prioritizing in 5A, attendance in school, finding the handful of remaining lost kids. It's not just a handful. When you add in the charters, it's more than that. But still, getting those students into school and regular attendance is such an important part of the work. It's a priority in the mental health plan for how we allocate our grant dollars from the state for this particular categorical. And it's certainly something that we want to improve. As you know, last year, during the course of the year, our average daily attendance averaged right around 89–90%. And the goal has always been 94%. So we want to make sure that we get back to that level with specific outreach for chronic absenteeism, for tardies, and for all of the other things that go along with kids in school. Because if they're not in school, we can't do our most effective work teaching them. And then finally, for 5B, you know, there's a tremendous amount of conflicting opinion and strong emotions about just about everything COVID related, from masks and no masks, from the vaccine and no vaccine, from COVID or the flu. But there's very little conflicting opinion, at least I've not seen any research to say that. We don't know that our students, our staff members, all of us, our community, have been impacted by the effects of COVID from a social, emotional, and mental health. From the fear of getting sick, to the social isolation that students experienced in that digital world and that we still experience sometimes if we're following social distancing and perhaps restricting going to activities and seeing relatives. So we felt like it was super important to prioritize that in our strategic plan. It's a combined effort from our student services team and our school counseling team in terms of supporting that. We also are counting on and partnering with the research and accountability team so that we can align the results of the Panorama SEL survey with student achievement results, because there's a clear relationship between if kids don't feel good about the work, they don't feel good about coming to school, they're not being as successful as learners. So that's really what we've done here to change Goal 5 to a strong, strong focus on the social emotional needs of our kids and teachers and adults.
I love that. I especially like the new hires completing the health awareness training. Is that a program or an onboarding process that was developed internally, or is there a vendor who's doing that?
The youth mental health first aid training is a curriculum, it's a program.
Yeah.
But we have in-house trainers in our social student services department who provide that training.
And this is for all new hires, not just teachers, anyone who works in the schools?
Everybody goes through it. We've done
Awesome.
training with our bus drivers, with our cafeteria staff, with our custodians, with our SROs on the youth mental health first aid training, so that everybody has, not that everybody's expected to be a counselor, but so that people can identify someone who potentially needs help and then get them to the resources that they need. We also have some additional dollars in our mental health allocation this year above and beyond as a result of the ARP ESSER plan. So that was one of the reasons why we've recommended hiring the additional attendance clerks under 5A. And then we've also identified additional social worker positions that we can allocate through that particular grant that would allow us to have a full-time social worker at every middle school and every high school and move up to 2 days a week at our elementary schools to provide that team support.
Well done.
Yeah, two things. And I was talking to the attorney, she said she works truancy cases and stuff, and we were just talking about how the state statute doesn't define tardy until like 6 hours later into the day, and I'm like, 6 hours into the day is ridiculous, you know what I mean? It's like, you're almost missing the whole day at that point. And so, I see at the bottom of the bullet, revised definitions and procedures for tardy. Are we reducing our number, just for our own internal purpose, are we reducing it down to like 2 hours to be late, or?
We don't have a firm number yet. That would be a part of after the board approves the strategic plan, next steps in terms of where we go from here. But yes, Ms. Torres is instrumental as a part of our truancy intervention program.
Yes, and just to follow up with the social workers, today I visited Toho, because I was doing some work on some other things, I was visiting the campus. And the SRO was telling me, I saw DCF coming to campus, and I was like, man, you get what, 5 or 10 of these visits, you know, a month? He goes, no, I get 5 to 10 visits a week. I was like, holy cannoli, Batman. So when you're talking about, I didn't know there were that many issues, you know, so when you talk about mental health, I mean, I thought it was 5 to 10 a month. He was like, no, we get 5 or 10 a week in just that school alone. And I'm not trying to target them. I can only imagine it being replicated at other places, so. And he says he doesn't know where he gets triggered from. You know, DCF can get called from people at home. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that happened on campus. It could be something, you know, that has nothing to do with school. But the SRO, once they know about it, they have to come in and they have to investigate it and stuff like that. So mental health is definitely something that we're taking seriously on campus.
Other questions or feedback on the strategic plan?
Dr. Pace, you bring this back, it's our time for questions, you bring them back one more time.
Yes, it will be on the agenda for your consideration and approval on the 21st. All right, that then brings us to an update based on the board's feedback as they're changing out the slides on our COVID protocols. As I've done some reflecting over these last couple of weeks in particular, I think one of the places that I could have done a better job is in communication about the COVID safety protocols that we are continuing to implement. You know, we had a huge focus on our Ready, Set, Start, SMART plan in June and July of 2020. What year we're in, almost, it's gone, it just seems like so crazy. But this year, because again, it was just kind of a way of work, we've not necessarily shared with the board and certainly not with our community the fact that we do still have a lot of those same protocols ongoing that I wanted to make sure that you are all aware of. First of all, just to give you an update from our local COVID data, last week, we are reporting through last Friday, 575 new cases of positive students. And over 3,400 students had to be quarantined. Keep in mind that we update the website every week, but sometimes there's a delay in when schools get the data to us, because a lot of times they're busy all day and into the night doing some of the contact tracing, determining who has to be quarantined. So we may not get the report until the following day or at the very end of the day when we've already summarized our data for the day to kind of get it in a sense so that we can report it. So if, for example, a school has a COVID case on Friday afternoon, that may not show up in this week's data. It will show up in the following week's data. But we are reporting on a regular ongoing basis the data that we have. It's very, very interesting because the student positivity rate is much different than it was a year ago. And in comparison to staff, it's very, very different. Because all of last year, we had more positive adults in our buildings than we had positive kids reporting. But now that role is reversed. So at the same time period last week, we only had 54 of our staff members report a positive test. That is an increase for students over the week before, and the same is reflected in the county's data. For week 35, which is August the 27th through September the 2nd, the overall trend for positive cases in our county, our community, as reported by the Department of Health, is going down for the third consecutive week. It also, the positivity rate is going down. So it was about 18%, 18.2% for that particular reporting period compared to the prior week, which is like 25%. The challenge is that with the children in the community, now we don't know, they're not all students, and the age group breakdowns are a little limited. But for the 5 to 17-year-old reporting groups for positive cases last week in the community, there were 772, up from 662 the week before. And that was about 31% of all of the positive cases that were reported in our community as of last week through the Department of Health. On a good news note, in addition to the fact that the adult data is trending downward for the last 3 weeks, as of this week, as of today, student data or children, that age group of 5 to 17 is starting to trend down. It's only reporting about an average of 60 cases a day, which would be 420 cases for the week, if at most, instead of 772. So our Department of Health supervisor, Bianca McCluskey, is encouraged, optimistic, that maybe this trend is starting to move downward for everybody in this age group. The challenge, of course, is what happens after Labor Day. In terms of vaccinations, in the county overall, if you're 65 and older, or I'm sorry, just 12 and up, if you've had a vaccine, 12 and up, 74% have had at least one dose of our residents, 62% have had both. For young people in that 12 to 14 age group, it's 59% with one dose, 40% complete. And if you look at it from 5 to 19, that number goes up to 67% vaccinated and 49% complete. And Mr. Eric Larson, Prescriptions Unlimited, partnered with the district last week. We offered vaccine clinics at Celebration High School, St. Cloud High School, and Liberty High School, which is where we also offered them back in May and June. And we had 37 people sign up at Celebration for vaccines, 60 at St. Cloud High, and 16 at Liberty. They will do a second round, because this is the Pfizer vaccine for that 12 and up age group. And at that second round, if people want to get their first shot, he administers it as well. We just ask that they schedule in advance, and we'll continue to promote that information. So that kind of gives you where we are with our local data. Wanted to also give you an update about contact tracing. We are using the protocols for quarantining that were released by the State Department of Health. And I confirmed with Ms. McCluskey last week, these are the guidelines that we are expected to follow under the order that the DOH filed. So this gives you the symptomatic decision tree for students. If I have symptoms, per the CDC, exposure is close contact of 6 feet or less for 15 minutes or more, all right? And that's typically inside. If they're playing around on the playground outside, that's a different story unless they're standing like right beside each other talking one-on-one together. If they're exposed and they're asymptomatic, you can see the chart at the yellow, they can return after. Well, first of all, if they're exposed to a positive case but they've been fully vaccinated, then we don't require them to quarantine. We just tell them to monitor for symptoms and encourage everybody to wear a mask. If they have not been vaccinated and they are asymptomatic, they can go and have a PCR test at least 4 days after the date of exposure. If it's negative, they can come back to school. And if it's asymptomatic and exposure, non-vaccinated, they can come back after 7 days with no test required. Someone who is symptomatic or COVID positive as a student, they can come back after they receive a negative test and they have been asymptomatic for at least 24 hours. 10 days have passed since symptom onset or positive test result and they have no fever for 24 hours and are otherwise improving, or they can seek a written permission from a healthcare provider in order to return to school, all right? And students who've had COVID before within the last 90 days or they're fully vaccinated, unless they're symptomatic, they don't have to quarantine. This is on our website in both Spanish and English for our parents to see under Covet Updates. Of course, it can't be simple, so the rules are different for adults than they are for students. The biggest difference is that for adults, the quarantine period at the shortest with the test is after day 6 and can return on day 7, or after 10 days if there's no, or otherwise, that's what that particular is. But again, someone who's been fully vaccinated or who's had COVID within the last 90 days does not have to quarantine again unless they become symptomatic. And again, all of our schools have this. This is what they follow when someone reports a positive case, whether it's exposure at home, exposure in the community, or at the particular school. The idea is to be surgical when we can, not sweeping. Those are the words of the DOH and also of Commissioner Corcoran and Chancellor Oliva. But obviously, the most important thing people can do is stay home if you don't feel well. If someone has a fever, has a cough, has a runny nose, loses their taste or smell, they really need to stay home, contact their school office, contact us, and we will provide instructions on where they can go and get tested or what kind of symptoms they should monitor, or they can contact their local medical provider.
Dr. Pace,
yes, sir,
excuse me, this is an order by the DOH or the DOE?
this is DOH.
Okay, so this is not an optional thing, this is mandated to the school district, this is how it is?
That is correct, sir. And I confirmed that with Ms. McCluskey last week. This is like the power of law.
Right.
Okay?
Now, the only question I have is, that parents have mentioned to me that I've read, is that there's a concern about not like how far, like if I'm in the room, somebody's positive, is it the students that are in the immediate desk, or how far away in a classroom do you have to be from somebody for them, because like say they're asymptomatic. I mean, obviously we're only talking about asymptomatic people. How far away from the person do they have to sit before somebody has to quarantine?
That's the 6 feet is what we go with. And so typically, we look at the seating chart and we go A, B, C, and D. Who are the people at the corners who are around that particular individual, and the same thing with the teacher. The challenge is that in middle school and high school, you've got to do that contact tracing over 7 periods of class. You're looking at 7 different teachers' seating charts, okay? And that's where that becomes a little bit difficult. The other challenge that we've run into, for example, particularly say in VPK, in most of the cases, if the teacher or the lead or one of the students in the VPK classroom is tested positive, we end up needing to quarantine everybody because they work in small groups, they're at the teacher table with the teacher, they aren't as faithful and conscientious about wearing their masks, they touch each other a lot. So, those are the things that kind of go into this problem.
So are we enforcing assigned seats then this year? Because I mean, I know before, I guess we assigned seats, but people can move, but this year we're like,
They
if
are
this is your
also,
seat,
we
that
have
is your
reminded our
seat, you know?
principals, and we meet again with them next week to say you should have a seating chart for every class, and even substitutes should make sure that they're using that seating chart to take attendance so that we can have an accurate record of where kids are sitting. The next layer of challenge comes in the common spaces. In our elementary schools, they have been very consistent about having a seating chart, and the students seat by class and they seat next to each other. And for example, I mentioned to you today earlier, Mr. Melendez, at Part and Settlement, I was walking with Ms. Corbett, and she's like, I said, so how's it going in the cafeteria? And I could see in, through the windows, and she says the biggest challenge is reminding the kids to sit on their dots because they have spaced out dots in the cafeteria, 1 per child, and try to keep that room in between them. And it's like, okay, let's remember to sit on our dots. That's easier for some 5-year-olds than others. It's easier for some 57-year-olds than others, okay? But, that's one of the other challenges that we have. The other piece is that particularly in a high school classroom or in a high school setting, if you're having to look at 7 class periods, we work really hard to try to make sure we have contact with each of those parents individually if we can, and don't just send a letter home in the book bag. Because we want to reassure parents, help them understand what to monitor for symptoms. So it can be an all-day job for somebody on the team to do contact tracing, depending on the particular situation. So those are just some of the
I got a
challenges.
question.
Yes.
About the, kind of piggybacking what Julie's saying, I'm trying to visualize myself as a teacher in a classroom, and I've been receiving emails and phone calls from parents who their children have been quarantine, 2, maybe 3 times. And statistically, it's unfortunate that kid that sits in the middle of the class, he's in a greater opportunity to be pushed back home. So I'm thinking as a teacher, well, if Johnny is caught, he's been sitting in the middle of the class and he's been quarantined, in order to keep him in class, why can't I just move him to an aisle, to a front or to the aisle? Well, when he returns, just to lessen his chances of statistically catching it again. Because if you put
That's a
him,
good idea, because one of the
Or put the kids
biggest,
who have had COVID in the middle.
that's what I mean, just something to lessen the recurrence of pushing these kids back home 2 and 3 times.
that's certainly great feedback that we will take to our principals next week, and help them kind of take that feedback into their classrooms. Because that is what frustrates parents and kids and teachers the most, is when somebody's been quarantined, a couple of times, still hasn't had COVID, doesn't think they're gonna get COVID, but we don't know that to be sure. And one of the ways that I think we have minimized spread in the schools was to be very conscientious about following the guidelines in terms of contact tracing and quarantines. We don't do that in isolation. Our Department of Health also does contact tracing with positive cases out in the community. So say, for example, a Little League team, somebody gets it and it's reported there instead of others, then it's up to the Department of Health to make contact with those families about what quarantining should look like. We've also had questions about siblings. So for example, if Mr. Melendez tests positive for COVID and Mr. Melendez has 2 brothers and a sister, does the rest of the family have to quarantine? It really depends on the level of exposure in the home. We advise people to really self-isolate at home whenever possible. Now, obviously, if somebody's 5, that's not possible. But if somebody's 15, they can stay in their room and do their homework as long as they don't share a bedroom with some of their other siblings. They use the bathroom when nobody else is in there, and we wipe it down with Clorox when they leave. I actually talked to one parent who was advocating on behalf of not quarantining her daughter because the sister had COVID. And she's like, listen, we have completely self-isolated that child. She's been in her classroom. In fact, I made her crawl out the window to go drive her truck to the test to get situated. So, it's just, there are very different reactions to this. And so that's what we have to keep in mind with each individual situation.
I don't know how many more slides we have, so maybe I'm just gonna ask right now. So one of the things that I'm noticing, just looking at the numbers from the last 2 weeks, is that our highest concentration of positive cases or quarantine cases and positive cases for students is in high schools, which is where we don't have a mask mandate or any kind of nothing. They can do what they want. So in the absence of being able to have any kind of conversation about that without causing a problem, and I'm asking this as a long-term solution because I feel like for the past 18 months, we've been having a lot of conversations about how do we mitigate things in the moment because we're expecting this to stop at some point, but it doesn't seem like it's stopping. It seems like this might be, and perhaps you can enlighten me on the conversations you've had with, any of the medical professionals or any of the other superintendents. I don't know what the conversations are that you're having, but in the absence of this having an end date and now seeing the numbers specifically for our high school students are the highest students that are quarantined, have we started to have a pointed conversation about a long-term plan? Because yes, seating them in a specific place might work. We have the pool testing, right? We're asking parents to vaccinate their kids and clearly that's not working. So I wanted this workshop specifically to talk about what is our long-term plan. This is what I think we need to be discussing. This isn't going anywhere. So what are the conversations that you're having with other superintendents, other school districts about what does this look like from now on?
I would caution us to make too many conclusions about the larger numbers in high school simply because of sheer population.
Right.
If you look, for example, at our smaller high school programs, OXA, PATH, Neo City, they don't have that high report of COVID cases. Some of it is a factor of population and the size of the population. I'm not saying that there's not more in high school, but the other thing is that quarantining is compounded in those high school settings because you've got a 7-period day. So kids are moving from place to place 7 times. Also keep in mind that kids are back to sports, kids are back to socializing, the kids sit together more closely in the cafeteria. So all of those things are things that we're gonna have to figure out how to mitigate and live through. And we're gonna continue to encourage people to seek guidance from their medical professionals about getting vaccinated and offering vaccines in a very convenient way to monitor it. The other piece that is on your, and I'll talk some more about specific protocols in just a moment, if you'll give me a second. We are tonight asking you to approve a contract with the lab that we used last year for on-site pool testing. This is voluntary. It can be for students and for staff. Parents have to complete a permission slip, but they don't have to be present. We honor that permission slip for the year until they tell us that they don't want their child tested evermore. And about every 5 weeks, we'll have folks on site to offer pool testing. Last year, if you remember, less than 1% of the results were positive. So we really felt like it gave us a good indicator of lower spread. But we also had lower spread in the community. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that rolls out. But it's gonna help us identify kids who maybe have COVID earlier before they're having a chance to kind of spread symptoms to everybody else. So I highly encourage that. We do a contract for on-site nursing, so we do an agency for 2 nurses because we're very short with our LPNs. But we'll be offering that with the board's approval tonight, starting when, Mr. Phelps?
Friday's the first day.
Friday would be the first day, so we already have a schedule, we're looking to roll that out. We're continuing to work with Prescriptions Unlimited on on-site vaccination clinics. We do it at high schools instead of elementary or middle schools, number one, because 12 and up are eligible for vaccines. But we also have the extended driveways, so it makes it easier for them to drive through, get the shot. The entire family can get that vaccine if they register ahead of time. It's not just relegated to our particular students. We have, as an effort to improve and increase our communication to the community, upgraded our website for this particular thing. So as you come to the front page of the website, you'll see on the left-hand corner where the COVID incidents are reported every week by school. It even has a search feature by the week per school, so you don't have to pull up the report if you don't want to, as well as then our COVID updates. So the diagrams that guide our screening, the mask policy is there as well. So we're working hard to try to improve that communication and reassure folks of what we are doing. This is an example of what those COVID incidents look like. We have combined them by the month so that, for example, you'll see August 21 as opposed to each week, because that list had gotten so long because we had left up the ones from last year. So they can go and click on a particular folder, click on a particular week and see the data for that particular week. They are updated every Monday afternoon so that by Tuesday morning, people can see that particular information updated. But I also wanted to share with you the physical mitigating strategies that we're still using. One of the documents on that COVID website, Covet Updates, is the same custodial cleaning protocol that we adopted last year that our teams are still using. We are still providing hand sanitizer and washing soap for bathrooms and hallways. To our schools, all they have to do is request that they're out. We are still providing the red spray bottles in every classroom with the peroxy, which is a little bit like spraying Lysol, but it's been safe for kids, and paper towels for classrooms. I know that one of the things Mr. Melendez and I've talked about is maybe we want to talk to staff, I can't require staff, but to encourage kids to wipe down desks in between if they're moving from station to station or from period to period. Every 90 days, we are spraying the OmniShield product, which provides a barrier to hard surfaces to prevent the spread of bacteria. And that's all bacteria. So whether you're talking about RSV or COVID or the flu, that goes down on desks, cafeteria tables, playground surfaces, and it prevents the physical spread of COVID from this particular piece. Our custodial teams are using ZD3, which is a safe, standard daily cleaning product. Again, it's kind of like Lysol or Clorox, but safe for students in schools. Every school now has at least one of the backpack size electrostatic sprayers. So if we have an outbreak in a classroom or an office, it's easy to go in and spray, and they can do the whole building if we feel like we need to. And we're providing extra masks to all of our LPNs for our health clinics in the schools, so that if a student's mask breaks during the course of the day, particularly the paper ones are prone to do so, they don't like their mask, or it's dirty that particular day, or they dropped it somewhere and can't find it, we will provide a mask to any student who wants one through our health clinic. And we do that on a regular basis, and we'll just keep doing it until the board tells me otherwise. But I wanted to again say that we are still following all of those same practices that we had in place last year. We've just not talked about it enough.
Okay.
I saw that
Yeah, I
the,
do have some.
no, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead,
I just saw, just before I came to the meeting, I saw where the governor was in St. Cloud to open up the monoclonal, is that about, I'm not even, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct, clinic. Are we have any role in that as far as marketing or not marketing, but just getting the word out?
We certainly do promote and support any of the public relations that comes out of the Department of Health or the Emergency Operations Center of the county, so I'll ask Dana to look at that. And we can certainly make our staff aware that that treatment is available as a proactive way, once you start to feel symptoms, to get a treatment early on that, they believe is effective.
So, two questions that I've been asked to bring up from community members. First, is the standardizing of procedures for quarantining. And we may just not know because it's not out in the public, but one of the concerns that is coming from parents is that different schools have different ways of quarantining or different protocols for quarantining, and that's not the case.
These are the guidelines that are on the website. This is what we instruct all of them to follow. And everybody in our office team is very familiar with them, I keep them on my desk, Tom keeps them on his desk. We ask the principals to keep them on this desk, and literally you follow the chart. This is what you do. And it has to be consistent because, as Mr. Arguello pointed out, really this is considered law. It was a part of the Department of Health order, just like the no mask mandate without a parent opt-out provision was.
Okay, so with regards to, what is the threshold for quarantining more than just a portion of the school? So I go back to the particular school we had to close. That was a decision that was made in concert with the district. I don't think that has happened any other time since then or before, correct? In this year, I mean.
That is the only school that we have decided to shut down for a temporary basis. The problem really becomes when you start looking at numbers and how many students are positive, how many students are quarantined, but also staff.
Yeah.
For example, in August of 2020, we had to close Harmony Middle School for a period of time, but that's because we had 16 positive staff members. And so when I began tracing the students that they'd come into contact with, as well as then the other staff members that they'd had come into contact with, and the fact that we need to have adequate supervision as well as safety for the school campus, it made more sense to convert everybody to digital learning and then bring everybody back after those quarantine periods were over. Last year, remember, we had the authority under the commissioner's executive's order to provide digital learning and count it both for FTE and instructional minutes, as long as it met the full length of the school day. We could count students in attendance. This year, the authority is not there to grant instructional minutes for an extended period of time or to earn FTE. Now, because our school day is already longer than required with our 7-hour instructional days, we have extra minutes for instruction built in to our annual 180-day student calendar. So when we close Celebration for those 2 weeks, fortunately, you had the benefit as well of a long weekend. So it actually was a 5-day period that we were able to kind of time out. Many of the people on the front end of that outbreak were going to be coming back either that Monday or Tuesday. So we knew that we could provide coverage and instruction for kids who were coming back. And we felt like that would give it a chance to kind of, like I said, basically time out, give us a chance to do that deep clean, and then bring everybody back. And we have seen a dramatic decrease in positivity coming out of Celebration K-8 since that particular timeout. If we were to have a hurricane and have to close for an extended period of time, we would have to look back at the calendar to decide if we were going to have to do makeup days or not as a result of missing those 2 days for those students. But we were permitted, because we were forced to quarantine the whole school, to count them as QP or quarantine present, stand up digital learning for that period of time, and then bring them back and are now working to get them all caught up.
So there's not like a threshold, it's just if you have a certain amount of teachers based on supervision and all of that, then you may make a decision at that point to close down a school if that's what's going on.
We are consulting with the principal, we're consulting with district staff, we're consulting with the Department of Health, and also I'm consulting with the Chancellor of DOE when we're making that decision. It's a last resort,
Sure.
but there's not like a magic number that says if you have 15 positive cases, you're gonna quarantine. You really have to look at the whole situation.
And at this point, have we distributed all of the one-to-one devices to students? Have they all? No?
It's in process right now.
Okay.
But we're standing that up now. That was one of the things that we expedited.
Yes, ma'am.
Because if you remember, Mr. Thorne's original plan was to say that not all
Right.
kids would have devices until, say, October.
Yeah.
I would say before the end of September now, kids are all gonna have devices, correct, Mr. Thorne?
It's gonna be right around then.
Yeah.
And cases are coming very soon,
Mhm.
but we're gonna get those devices out first.
And every time a student has to go home to quarantine, if they don't have a device, we make sure that we can issue them a device and then they don't have to return it. They're gonna keep it. That'll be their device for the rest of the year.
Are we also expediting the infrastructure for hotspots? Yeah? Okay.
We have over 4,000 hotspots right now if
Oh.
they're needed.
Great. Thank you. So that brings me to another concern, which is, we don't technically have digital learning, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I know that over the summer, there was training for our staff to sort of be able to use, what's it, Canvas, Teams, Canvas? So does our staff understand the expectation of you're switching to this, and what is how's staff feeling about having to turn over into using the digital platforms temporarily? What was the result of that training?
We included in our pre-planning agenda 2 specific blocks of time. One, to go over a digital plan so that they could convert easily if they needed to. And our instructional continuity plan is another one of the documents on the COVID website that shows what our plan is to be able to take that same curriculum unit plan that teachers are using in the classroom and convert it through technology. We also set aside specific time and provided training and support for teachers to build their classes in Teams or Canvas, just like they did last year. And we encourage them to provide the assignments for all of their QP kids on an ongoing basis. I can't require them to turn on their cameras or provide direct instruction, but we are providing that support. And we're looking at standing up additional support through our supplementary academic assistance scholars and our ESSER and ART dollars to say, okay, do we stand up a teacher on each grade level who's willing to work an extra hour during the course of the day, before school, after school, during their planning period, and then spend that extra hour supporting any of the students in that grade level or in that particular subject area? We wouldn't do it for every single course at the high school level, but say, for example, your high demand courses, algebra, geometry, biology, 9th and 10th grade English. Let's have somebody that's set aside specifically at each school, aligned with the curriculum unit plans, to convert those kids to digital learning for that period of time, at least to provide answers to questions, instructions for assignments, that kind of stuff, so that then we can build in during the school day intervention time, support when they come back for anything that they may have missed. But that has been communicated as an expectation. And we don't require teachers to use COVID leave as long as they are feeling strong enough and well enough and willing to provide instruction virtually during a COVID quarantine period for adults.
Okay, and you said that process of having one specific instructor per, I guess, core curriculum or core class has not been implemented. It's going to be implemented at some point.
I'm working on a plan for that now.
Okay, because I guess the health concerns, I cannot overstate. I think we're clear with that. But the externality of this is that there's no, and I'm probably wrong about this because I know how efficient you guys are. So if I am, please, or maybe it's not something you have put into like a specific plan, but for example, I have a high schooler who is currently about to start applying for schools, and this child is freaking out because there's this amount of time for her GPA to be a certain thing for her to go into a specific school that she's dreaming of going to, right? So anything in the high school level, and especially those upperclassmen and women, can affect their entry to college. This is not a mask mandate conversation. This is an education conversation. And so I really worry about what is that plan to make sure that they're not losing that valuable time to make those grades and to really have a strong, for lack of a better term, resume to present to their colleges, right? And it sounds like you guys are definitely thinking about some of those things, but I'm thinking about this, and I have parents thinking about this, having conversations with me about, this is my kid's situation. What happens if we close a school and they're not able to, continue on?
If we make a decision to close a school, for example, with Celebration K-8, Mr. Thorne and his team went out to Celebration K-8 and before the end of the day, had devices ready to send home with those students because their tech was out on COVID. So if we're in that situation, we will ensure that the students have the devices that they need, whether it's a one-to-one device and we haven't issued it yet, or a hotspot or both, to go home and convert to digital instruction. We're also in the process of adding back to our website those digital tools. We also set up a digital hotline specifically for the students and parents for that particular situation that was special for them, so that they could call and get questions. And our teachers, remember, other than our new teachers, had to do this last year in the course of a week. And so, but we built in time during pre-planning and support through the green shirts, because that's the other piece that we've been able to expand through the one-to-one plan, is the green shirt support at each school. So they're there to provide answers to questions that teachers may have or parents may have if they're unfamiliar or uncomfortable with that technology. But if we have to close for a couple of days, instruction has to go on, or we can't count the kids' QP. They would just be absent. And the concern again is from an FTE audit standpoint, instructional time. The reason why we have not stood up a digital option like we had last year is because there is no commissioner's order or executive order that allows for it, and students would not be considered getting the instructional minutes that they need, which counts toward grades and promotion. So for our students that are seniors, that's one of the reasons why too in Goal 5, you see so much social and emotional and mental support. Because we know this is scary. It's scary for everybody. It's scary for 5-year-olds, it's scary for those 17 and 18-year-olds who are right now in the process of making decisions that are life-changing for their future. So that's Zello is we're standing up in a K-12 platform for the college and career information. You'll see Mr. Cook active on our social media and accessible to kids and to parents who have questions about these particular features. It's not ideal. It's not perfect. We're gonna have to make it better as we go. But that's one of the things that we've committed to from the very beginning.
So I'm sorry, just to follow up on that one. What digital curriculum did they take? So when Celebration K got out, did they use Osceola Virtual School? Did they do hybrid simultaneous teaching? What did they use?
No, they're using the same curriculum unit plans and digital resources that our classroom teachers are using on a regular basis. They just access it through Teams.
So it was kind of like a digital option to a certain degree, so the instructor was still there.
For a short period of time.
I was just following up and clarifying that.
Thank you. With regards to, and I know that I'm focusing specifically on like my seniors and juniors. So SATs, ACTs, we typically have those at school. So we have, I think they start in October? Okay. And we have makeup days later on, okay. I guess those entities haven't had conversations about COVID procedures for students, right?
We do
I'm
social
assuming-
distancing
Yeah.
when we're administering those tests in the classroom, in the schools as best that we can. But there are no digital options anymore for those programs, other than obviously College Board has Khan Academy where students can practice and prep. ACT has another program. And within our junior and senior curriculum, opportunities to work on Khan Academy are embedded in that particular unit plan in our ELA classes and math classes.
Are you finished, Ms. Cassie? I just have one question.
I am, for now.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah.
On the COVID incidents, I think it might be, because we have like quarantine students, positive students, quarantine personnel, positive personnel. Is it possible for us to see hospitalizations on there? Because sometimes that could be more grave. If I see positive students and I see hospitalizations at a high ratio, that means that they're getting pretty serious, as opposed to just being positive, just having flu-like symptoms and being okay. Because at least that means like I can judge like the severity of the cases.
We aren't necessarily tracking or getting reports back from people about who's been hospitalized, other than on a case-by-case basis, as those principals and teachers are working to meet the needs of particular families. We do look weekly at the data from Nemours Children's Hospital to show what their hospital system is reporting for children's hospitalizations. And the one thing that Ms. McCluskey did share with me again today is that we continue to see far fewer numbers of students in that 5 to 17-year-old age group being hospitalized and being very, very sick. There are kids on vents, absolutely, in our community, but that's not a significant number. If it's my kid, it's the only number that matters.
Right.
I understand that. But I will see what I can find out in terms of reporting hospitalizations.
Because we only have like 3 hospitals from
Yeah.
because they don't even have to say, are you a student or not? We just say, hey, can the Celebration Hospital, Florida Hospital, tell us the number of people from age 5 to 17 that have been hospitalized? We can make the assumption. I'm pretty sure there's a couple 17-year-olds that are not in school, but
One of the
99% of the
challenges
time they
with
are.
the hospital reporting is that they're no longer required to report to the state dashboard for COVID-related hospitalizations. So it's dependent on an individual conversation between the Department of Health locally and the hospitals to provide and gather that information and collect it and report it. There is a hospitalization feature in the weekly COVID incident report, but I don't believe it's broken down by age. I will go back and check.
Because are we allowed to ask them? Because we only have like 2 hospitals, and I think, right? And more than 2 hospital systems. I'm talking about basically.
I will find out. Let me do some more
Maybe they
research
could just
on that.
give us the data. I mean, even though it's not a requirement of the Department of Health, if they can just tell us, hey, give us a weekly report, you know.
Let me see what I can find out, and I'll report back to the board in a board update.
Any other questions? Anything else before we adjourn the workshop?
I'll make a quick comment. If we were gonna defy the governor on any one of his policies, it would make sense that we would be defying him on the digital aspect option. Because the fact is, there's a ton of our students that are caught up in that particular situation, not only School Board Member Castillo's daughter, but many, right? That's a particularly serious concern that we should be addressing. And if we're gonna be saying that we're protecting the interests of the students in any of these particular situations, it would be the one that's actually gonna have lasting effects, or the one that is actually gonna have a consequence that is all of our students, right? Any kid that gets shut down in this lockdown, we put them in a situation where we're endangering what their academic results may be. So, I mean, to me, that's worth the discussion. Obviously, I know why we're not discussing it here right now, but I think that it's obviously something that, should be communicated.
And it is something that my fellow superintendents and I have talked about at our level. The most important thing I think that we can do is to have a backup plan.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, I'm not gonna claim that it is, but to have a backup plan. And that's one of the reasons why the work that was done this summer on the curriculum unit plans was specifically designed to be able to easily transition from face-to-face to digital if we were ever to get into that situation and have to, or if we're having to do it for 1 day or 2 days or 5 days or 7 days or 10 days. So that we have a structure in place to do. Perfect? No, but is it the same as having that teacher in the classroom providing instruction all day? No, but it will, I believe, fill in the gap. And then with the commitment that when kids do come back, there's gonna be dedicated time, whether it's during their MTSS time, their III time, their LASSO period at Osceola High School, or their charge period at Liberty High School, where those students can go and get assistance from their dedicated teachers to make up anything gaps that were missed while they were out.
I think it's really a two-front issue. The first front being one which provides the students to continue their education under the circumstances that they may find themselves in, according to what the Department of Health is telling them they have to follow, right? And the other would be making sure that we're being honest about what our approach is so that it's continuous, you know? I mean, because we're obviously gonna have students that are gonna get caught up in this. It may not make a big difference if you're in third grade, like, you know, one of my kids is. It's gonna make a big difference if you're in the 11th or 12th grade. And it's not because of us. It's not something that's within our control, right? The state has said that you have to follow these quarantine protocols. We may find ourselves where the entire student body or all of our faculty is having an issue and the school gets shut down. So it's not fair that we are put into a situation where we can't follow the law according to what the law is because of what the law says we have to do. So then what it does is it creates an entire body of people that have a recourse to the state that says, well, the state has put us in both of these situations simultaneously, and then the state has to provide us with an option that does not harm the school district or the people who are involved.
Let me make sure I do clarify one piece of that. You're in that the state has provided us the option of providing students who are quarantined that digital intervention during that designated quarantine period. We have put a structure and a system in place with the training that we provided for teachers, the devices that we're getting out to students, the curriculum unit plan designs, and our digital resources that will allow students to continue their instruction. And in order for them to count as QP, whether it's 2 days or 7 days or 10 days, they must have support from teachers or someone at the school. Whether it's the academic, the reading coach, the math coach, somebody on the team, they must have support. And we must provide the targeted intervention when they come back that I was just describing to you. So we do have a structure in place. What I'm saying is that we have to work to continue to make that better. And also, I think, advocate on behalf of the fact that this isn't going away. And there are students who are gonna have to be quarantined more than once at no fault of their own and at no fault of any of us or their teachers or their parents or anyone else. So what are we gonna do to fill that gap? And that's what we are working to continue to get better at on a daily basis and to get to that guaranteed viable curriculum, the consistency across all 54 schools for every classroom. That's all I can commit to you.
Mr. Bass, you good?
I'm good, sir. Thanks.
With that, we will adjourn the school board workshop, and we will start again with our regular board meeting at 5:30. Thank you all very much.